Why are you sleeping? You are fired.
She didn't call in sick. She didn't ask for help. She didn't complain to a single soul. For 48 hours straight, no sleep, no breaks, barely any food. She sat at that desk and fought a battle nobody else in that building even knew was happening. Not her colleagues, not her manager, not even the man whose name was on the building. She found something. Something small at first, the kind of thing most people would have scrolled past, logged as a system quirk and forgotten about by lunch. But she wasn't most people. She looked closer. And the closer she looked, the worse it got. So she stayed. She stayed when her colleagues went home. She stayed when the cleaning crew came through and killed half the lights. She stayed when the city outside went quiet and the only sounds left were the hum of servers and the soft click of her keyboard. She stayed because she understood something nobody else in that building did, that what was coming, if she didn't stop it, would destroy everything. And she almost did stop it. Almost, because on hour 48, with her eyes burning and her hands still moving across the keyboard, her body finally did what bodies do when you push them past every limit they have. It shut down, just for a moment, just long enough for her eyes to close and her head to drop, just long enough for the wrong person to walk in. He didn't ask if she was okay. He didn't check the screen in front of her. He didn't give her one single second to explain. He just looked at her, looked around at who was watching, and said, "Pack your things." She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She didn't even raise her voice. Because she knew something he didn't. And what happened next, in the 2 hours that followed, would shake that entire building to its foundation. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. To understand what happened that morning, you have to understand who Nia Carter was before it. Not the version of her that people saw in the office. Quiet, focused, always at her desk 20 minutes before anyone else arrived. Not the version that her colleagues had reduced to a job title and a polite nod in the hallway. The real Nia, the full picture. Because the full picture matters, it always does. And in this story, the fact that nobody bothered to look at it is exactly how everything went wrong. Nia grew up in a small house in southwest Atlanta, the middle child of 3, raised by a mother who worked double shifts at a hospital and a father who fixed computers out of the garage on weekends for extra money. That garage is where it started. She'd sit on an overturned bucket next to her dad, watching his hands move through circuit boards and motherboards and tangled wires, and she'd ask questions, constant questions. Why does this connect here? What happens if you move that? What does this part do when the system is under pressure? Her father never told her to stop asking. He answered every single one. By the time she was 12, she was fixing her neighbor's computers. By 16, she'd taught herself 3 programming languages from library books and YouTube tutorials. By the time she graduated high school, she had a full scholarship to Georgia Tech waiting for her. Not because anyone handed it to her, but because she earned every single point of it. College was where she came alive. Not socially, she was never the loudest person in any room, but intellectually. She found cybersecurity almost by accident, a single elective course in her sophomore year that she took because it fit her schedule. Within 2 weeks, she knew she'd found her thing, the thing that made her brain light up the way her father's garage used to. Cybersecurity is, at its core, about thinking like the enemy. It's about asking not just how a system works, but how it breaks. Where are the cracks? Where does the logic fail? What would someone who wanted to destroy this look for? It requires a specific kind of mind, patient, precise, creative, and deeply suspicious of anything that looks too clean. Nia had that mind naturally. She graduated top of her class, turned down 2 offers from federal contractors, and took a junior analyst position at a small fintech startup in Atlanta instead. Her mother thought she was crazy. Her father smiled and said nothing, which meant he understood. The startup grew. She grew with it. By the time it became ClearPath Financial, one of the fastest growing fintech companies in the Southeast, Nia Carter was senior cybersecurity analyst, the person responsible for keeping the entire digital infrastructure of a company that processed millions of dollars in transactions every single day safe, clean, and intact. She was 34 years old. She had no direct reports. She had no office. She had no title that matched her actual contribution. But she had something better than all of that. She had the kind of knowledge that doesn't show up on an org chart. The kind that lives in your hands and your instincts and the quiet hours you spend learning things nobody asked you to learn. She knew ClearPath's system the way a surgeon knows a body, not just the surface, not just the visible parts, but the deep architecture. The places where things connected that nobody else had thought to check. The legacy pathways that predated 3 system upgrades and had never been fully closed off. The patterns in the data that looked like noise to everyone else but whispered something different to her. She had tried to explain this to people, multiple times. Most of them nodded politely and went back to whatever they were doing. That was the part that wore on her. Not the long hours, not the complexity of the work, not even the fact that her contributions were largely invisible to the people above her. It was the politeness of the dismissal. The way intelligent people could look directly at a warning and decide, without real consideration, that it probably didn't mean anything. She had learned to work around it, to do what needed to be done without waiting for permission or validation, to protect a system that didn't fully know she was protecting it, until the week that changed everything. It started on a Tuesday, a nothing day, the kind of day that doesn't feel significant while you're in it. Nia was running routine diagnostics, something she did every Tuesday and Friday, morning before the rest of the office filled up, not because it was required, because she had learned years ago that the best time to catch something wrong was before the noise of normal operations buried it. The system looked clean. It always looked clean on the surface. That was the point. But on this Tuesday, there was something small, barely a flicker in the data. A pattern in the authentication logs that was just slightly off. Not wrong enough to trigger any automated alert. Not visible enough to catch a passing glance. Just a quiet little anomaly, sitting there like a splinter under the skin. Most analysts would have logged it, assigned it a low-priority ticket, and moved on. Nia stared at it for a long time. Then she pulled the logs from the previous week. The pattern was there too. Smaller, quieter, but there she pulled the week before that. There again. She went back 6 weeks, then 8, then 10, and what she saw when she laid all of it out in sequence made something cold move through her chest. This wasn't random. This wasn't a software glitch or a misconfigured server or the kind of digital hiccup that happens in any complex system. This was deliberate, careful, patient. Someone had been inside their network, not breaking in loudly, no alarms, no obvious intrusion signatures. They had been slipping in quietly, through a vulnerability so subtle it hadn't even been classified as one yet. They had been mapping, learning, getting comfortable. Like someone who had made a copy of your house key and had been walking through your home late at night for months, not taking anything, not moving anything, just learning where everything was, learning the layout, learning your routines, learning the exact right moment to make their move. Nia sat back in her chair and took a breath. This was not small. This was not a routine concern. This was sophisticated, coordinated, and it was aimed directly at their payment infrastructure. The most critical, most sensitive part of everything they built. She wrote it up. A full report, detailed, clear, with the log data attached, and her analysis laid out in language that didn't require a technical background to understand. She sent it to her direct supervisor. She flagged it urgent. Her supervisor read it, sent back 3 lines. Thanks for flagging. We get a lot of these. I'll loop in the team this week. This week. Not today. Not now. This week. She followed up 2 days later, still on the list. Things are busy with the investor prep. She followed up again. Nothing. She escalated, carefully, professionally, to the head of IT. Got a meeting. Sat across from a man who had been in his role for 8 months, who was sharp and well-intentioned, and who listened to her entire presentation with the focused expression of someone who was already composing his rebuttal. Our automated systems would have caught something this significant, he said when she finished. The automated systems are looking for known threat signatures. she said. This pattern doesn't match any existing signature because it's new. That's what makes it dangerous. He nodded slowly, the way people nod when they want to appear thoughtful without actually changing their position. I hear you. Let me take a look at it. He looked at it. His assessment was that the risk level was low. He documented that assessment and filed it. That was Thursday. By Sunday night, Nia was back at her desk. Not because anyone asked her to be. Because she had gone home Friday, tried to sleep, failed, driven back to the office at 11 p.m., badged in with the security guard who knew her by name because she was there so often at strange hours, and sat back down in front of the system that was quietly, patiently being taken apart by people she couldn't yet see. She worked through Sunday night. She worked through Monday. She slept for 3 hours in her car in the parking garage Monday afternoon, set an alarm, woke up, went back inside. By Tuesday morning she had been at it for over 40 hours, and what she had found in those 40 hours had graduated from alarming to terrifying. They weren't just inside the network. They were inside the core payment processing architecture. They had identified the highest value transaction windows. They had mapped the exact load pattern that occurred during large-scale investor presentations. The specific moment when the system was processing the most data, fielding the most external connections, running at maximum capacity and therefore maximum vulnerability. And that moment was coming. ClearPath's biggest investor presentation of the year was scheduled for Tuesday, today. In a few hours, she started building defenses, patching, rerouting, isolating infected nodes, constructing digital walls in real time. She worked fast and she worked clean and she was good at this. She was very good at this. But she was also one person working without full administrative access on a system that was under active, professional assault. She needed help. She needed resources. She needed someone above her to take this seriously right now. But the office was filling up around her and everyone was focused on the presentation and the investors and the numbers and the shine of a big day. And the woman at the corner desk who had been there all night was just part of the background noise. Hour 47. Her vision was starting to blur at the edges. Her hands were still moving, still accurate, but her body was sending signals she was getting better and better at ignoring. Hour 48. She doesn't remember her eyes closing. Marcus Reed had not had a good morning. The traffic from Buckhead had been brutal. His 7 a.m. call with the lead investor had gone fine but not great. There was a question about Q3 projections that he'd handled smoothly, the way he handled everything. But it had left a small, uncomfortable residue of uncertainty that he didn't like carrying into a big day. He was the kind of man who needed to feel in control before he could perform confidence. And performance was everything. He had built ClearPath on the strength of his presence as much as his product. The suits, the handshake, the ability to walk into any room and make the people in it feel like they'd backed the right horse. He stepped off the elevator at 8:47 a.m., already scanning the floor the way he always did, reading the room before anyone knew he was reading it. And then he stopped. There she was. Third desk from the left window, head down, completely still, out cold, not dozing, not resting her eyes, asleep. At her desk. On the morning of the most important presentation the company had done all year. He felt something move through him that he would have called disbelief if he was being generous, and contempt if he was being honest. The office assistant saw him stop and followed his gaze. Then someone nearby noticed. Then someone else. That quiet ripple of collective awareness that spreads through an open-plan office when something has gone wrong, or when something is about to. Marcus didn't say anything immediately. He walked closer, slow, measured. His eyes moved to her screen briefly. He registered that something was on it, alerts of some kind, but didn't stop to read them, didn't pause to consider what they might mean. He was reading the situation the way he always read situations, quickly, through the lens of what it looked like, rather than what it was. What it looked like was unacceptable. He cleared his throat. Nothing. Is this what we're doing now? His voice cut across the floor, sharp and public. Heads turned. Someone near the coffee station froze mid-pour. Nia stirred, slow, heavy. The way someone surfaces from the kind of sleep that comes after a body has been pushed past its limits. Her eyes opened halfway, unfocused, adjusting. She looked at him. She didn't speak. She didn't apologize. She just looked at him with eyes that were exhausted and steady at the same time. Eyes that had been looking at threat data for 2 days straight and were not, in this moment, capable of manufacturing the kind of startled guilt he was expecting. That stillness, that absence of the reaction he wanted, it struck him as defiance. "You getting paid to take naps here?" he said. The floor was completely silent now. Everyone watching, nobody moving. Naya's lips parted slightly. She was awake enough now to form words. She was trying to find the beginning of the sentence. "I've been here for 48 hours. There's an active attack on our system. I need you to listen to me right now." But it's a long sentence, and her brain was clawing its way through layers of exhaustion to reach it. And before she could get there, now he turned and walked away. That was the whole conversation. No question, no curiosity. No "are you all right" or "what's going on" or even "this is inappropriate, we need to talk." Just a decision made in 30 seconds based on 5 seconds of observation, because that was enough information for a man who had never once been wrong in his own mind. Nia sat there for a moment. Just a moment. The screen in front of her was still active, still alive with alerts, still screaming, in the language she had spent years learning to read, that something catastrophic was building in the walls of this building that nobody could see. She pushed her chair back, stood up, slowly, deliberately, with the specific kind of care you use when your body is running on empty, and you need every movement to be intentional. She walked to HR. Nobody spoke to her as she passed. The HR manager's name was Diane. She was efficient, professional, and deeply uncomfortable. She had been in HR for 15 years, and she had learned to recognize the specific expression on a person's face when they were being treated unjustly, and they knew it, and they were choosing, very deliberately, not to make it worse. Nia had that expression. Marcus stood. He didn't sit. That was intentional too. The stance of someone who had already made his decision and was performing the paperwork as a formality. "We have standards here," he said. "This isn't a place where you come to sleep. If you can't manage basic professional conduct, you don't belong here." Diane glanced at Nia carefully. "Would you like to explain what happened?" There was the opening, the chance. Everything that needed to be said was right there, waiting. Nia looked at Diane. Then she looked at Marcus. She saw his posture, his expression, the set of his jaw, the body language of a man who was not in a listening position, who was in a concluding position. She made a calculation. Not out of defeat, out of something more precise than that. "I understand," she said quietly. Marcus blinked. He had expected defense, explanation, at minimum, maybe tears. The absence of all three caught him off guard in a way he covered with impatience. "Good," he said. "That makes this straightforward." He looked at Diane. "Terminate effective immediately." Diane nodded, started typing. The machinery of corporate consequence moved quickly and cleanly. Nia reached for the pen. She signed her name with a steady hand. Diane noticed that. She would think about it later. Not the termination. She'd processed dozens of those. The hand, the absolute steadiness of it. Like a woman who had already accepted something much larger than this. "Can I collect my things?" Nia asked. "Make it quick," Marcus said. She nodded once and walked back to her desk. This is the part of the story that says everything about who Nia Carter actually was. Because here is what any reasonable person would have done in her position. Gone back to that desk, picked up the personal items, the small plant, the framed photo, the spare charger, put them in a bag, taken one last look at the screen she'd been staring at for 2 days, thought not my problem anymore, and walked out. That is what dignity looks like in most situations. You don't owe a company that just dismissed you anything beyond what's legally required. Certainly not your continued labor. Certainly not one more unpaid, uncredited hour of the expertise they just decided wasn't worth basic human consideration. Nia knew all of this. She sat back down anyway, not out of desperation, not out of any hope that it would change what had just happened, not because she needed this job or couldn't find another one. She sat back down because there was an active, coordinated cyber attack building to a critical point in approximately 90 minutes, and the fact that she had just been fired did not change the reality of that threat or the consequences of letting it detonate. She was thinking about the customers. The ordinary people who had their financial data sitting in ClearPath's system, their bank account numbers, their transaction histories, their personal information. People who had nothing to do with Marcus Reed or investor presentations or office politics. People who had simply trusted this platform with something important. She thought about them, and she opened the screen, and she kept going. The system had continued moving while she was in HR. They were getting bolder now, the attackers. The pattern had shifted, less probing, more pushing. They had detected, on some level, that the defenses had gone quiet, that their adversary had been interrupted. They think I'm gone, she realized. She started typing. Her access credentials had already been flagged for termination. She could feel the system getting ready to lock her out. In maybe 30 minutes, her login would fail and she'd be completely blind. Unless she navigated through 3 layers of system architecture, moving with the efficiency of someone who had helped build what she was moving through. She found it exactly where she'd left it, years ago, when she was part of the team that designed the original infrastructure before the last major upgrade, a legacy administrative pathway, not a backdoor in the criminal sense, no vulnerability she'd planted, nothing designed for malicious use. Just an old access route that had been superseded by newer architecture and never fully decommissioned, forgotten by everyone except the person who helped create it. She hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Using this after her termination was, technically, a gray area. Not illegal, she hadn't introduced any new vulnerability, hadn't breached any system she wasn't already authorized for as of this morning. But it was a line. She knew it was a line. She thought about the customers again. She crossed it, access granted. She exhaled slowly and went deeper than she'd been able to go before, deeper than her regular credentials allowed, into the core architecture of ClearPath's payment infrastructure. And what she saw there made her jaw tighten. It wasn't just an intrusion, it was an occupation. They had been inside for longer than she'd initially estimated, not days but possibly weeks. They had moved slowly, with extraordinary patience, embedding themselves into the system's normal processes, the way a virus embeds into a cell. They weren't sitting on the outside trying to break through walls. They were already inside the walls, had been for some time, and they were now simply waiting for the right moment to activate. She traced the architecture of what they'd built, because it was architecture, as deliberate and structured as anything a legitimate engineer would design. She identified 7 distinct points of compromise, each placed at a critical junction in the payment processing pipeline. 7 pressure points, any one of them, triggered at the right moment, could cause significant damage. All 7 triggered simultaneously during peak load. It would be a massacre. She checked the time. 1 hour and 12 minutes until the presentation went live. Okay, she thought. Okay. She pulled up her analysis tools, her containment protocols, the defensive architecture she'd been developing in her head for the last 48 hours, but hadn't had the access level to fully deploy. Now she had access. Now she could build. She built. A junior analyst named Darius walked by her desk, slowed, stopped. He'd heard what happened. News traveled at light speed in a quiet office. He looked at her screen, then at her, confused. Hey are you okay? I'm fine. Are you sure? Because I heard that. I said I'm fine. She said it the way you say something when you don't have the bandwidth to say anything else. He heard it, nodded, and kept walking. She kept building. Angela Marsh had been head of operations at ClearPath for 3 years. She was the kind of person who noticed things. Not dramatically, not loudly. She didn't make a production of her observations. She just paid attention, and she remembered what she saw, and over time the things she noticed added up to a picture that was usually more accurate than whatever the official version was. She had noticed Nia Carter a long time ago, not as a problem, not as a personality, not as any of the categories that people in offices tend to file each other into. She had noticed her as a presence, the kind of presence that quiet, deeply competent people have. The kind you only fully see when you're paying close attention. She had seen the security flag Nia submitted the previous week, had read through it in her role as operations head, understood about 60% of the technical language, and understood 100% of the urgency in the writing. Had mentioned it to Marcus, who had waved it off the way he waved off most things that didn't originate from him. Had felt uncomfortable about that, but not uncomfortable enough to push further. She was feeling extremely uncomfortable about that now. When Marcus came back to the floor after the HR meeting, something in his energy told her the Nia situation had been resolved in exactly the blunt, irreversible way she was afraid it had been. She watched him settle back into preparation mode, all control and forward motion, and she felt the discomfort sharpen into something closer to dread. Then she walked past Nia's desk, stopped. Nia hadn't left, was still sitting there, fingers moving, screens alive with something Angela could see was far more complex and urgent than any normal workday activity. Angela watched for a moment, then stepped closer. Nia, nothing. Nia, firmer this time. Nia looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face drawn with the specific hollowness of extended exhaustion. But her gaze was completely clear, present, sharp, focused. "Talk to me," Angela said. Nia turned the screen slightly, showed her. Angela didn't fully understand everything on the screen, but she understood enough. The volume of alerts, the architectural diagrams with red indicators clustered around the payment processing nodes, the timestamps showing activity that stretched back weeks. She understood the expression on Nia's face, which was not the expression of someone overreacting. "This is what you flagged last week," Angela said. It wasn't a question. "It's worse now," Nia said. "How much worse?" Nia held her gaze. "If I don't finish what I'm doing and they trigger during the presentation, this company doesn't survive it cleanly. Customer data, transaction records, financial infrastructure, all of it." Angela's chest tightened. "Why didn't you?" She stopped herself, looked at Nia, looked at the desk where the signed termination paperwork was already on its way to being filed. "Right," she said quietly. "Right." She stood up straight. "Stay here," she said, and she walked toward Marcus's office without hesitation, without slowing down, without knocking. The investors were seated, 3 of them, the kind of men who moved quietly and sat with the ease of people who had never in their lives felt out of place in any room. Marcus was in full presentation mode, standing, commanding, his energy filling the space the way it always did when he was at his best. The door opened. He felt it before he saw it. That interruption energy. He turned. Angela. Her face told him before she said a word that this was not the kind of interruption you handled by raising an eyebrow and saying, "Not now." But he tried anyway. "Not now, Angela. It's Nia," she said. She kept her voice low, controlled, but didn't soften the urgency in it. "I handled Nia. She's still at her desk. She's been working this whole time." She stepped closer. "Marcus," I looked at her screen. "Angela." She showed me. "It's everything she flagged last week. It's worse." A beat. Significantly worse. Something moved behind his eyes. Not belief, not yet, but the first hairline crack in the certainty. "The threat is to the payment infrastructure," Angela continued, voice barely above a murmur. She said if it triggers during peak presentation load, she's creating a narrative to get her job back. Angela looked at him steadily. She signed the termination papers and went back to work on a breach she won't benefit from stopping. Does that sound like someone creating a narrative? Silence. Behind them, one of the investors shifted slightly in his seat. Marcus held Angela's gaze for a long moment. Something was happening in the calculation behind his eyes, the slow, resistant process of a confident man beginning to consider that he might have made a mistake. Then the screen flickered, just once. A half-second glitch, a visual hiccup. He turned. The presentation screen was still running, but something in the underlying system had stuttered, just for a fraction of a second, in a way that had no explanation if everything was fine. "What was that?" one of the investors asked. Marcus picked up the remote, advanced the slide. The screen responded normally. He exhaled. Then the screen went black, not dim, not paused. Black. A complete failure. Total loss of display. The room went very quiet. He clicked the remote. Nothing. Again. Nothing again. "Is there a technical issue?" another investor asked, his voice carrying the particular neutrality of a man who has just upgraded his level of concern. Marcus set down the remote, turned to Angela, and in the way his expression had shifted, From control to something unsteady, something almost unfamiliar on his face. She saw it. The crack had become a fracture. "Fix it," he said, quietly now. No performance in it. "I can't fix it," she said. "The team can't get in deep enough. Nia can." He was already moving. The walk across the floor felt different than it had a few hours ago. This time there was no authority in it. No performance. Just a man moving quickly through a space that suddenly felt less like his than it had that morning. People looked up as he passed and looked away again. They had seen what happened earlier. They were watching what happened now. He reached her desk. She was still working. Head down, fingers moving, completely locked into the system around her. She hadn't paused. She hadn't been watching the door waiting for him. She was simply doing what she had been doing for 2 days. The work. The precise and essential work, without acknowledgement or audience. He stood there for a second. Just a second, but it was long enough to feel everything that was packed into it. "Nia." She didn't turn. "I need admin access restored," she said. Flat, direct. No greeting, no title, no acknowledgement of the power structure that had very recently made itself known to her. Just the practical statement of what was required. "You're still logged in? Through a back door you forgot existed." She said it without heat, just fact. "I helped design this system. I know where the seams are." He stepped closer, looked at the screen she was working on and felt, for the first time, the full weight of what he hadn't understood. "What's happening?" he asked. Now she turned, looked at him directly with those red-rimmed, steady eyes. "They're not trying to get in," she said. "They're already in. They've been in for weeks. They've been mapping your payment infrastructure. And they're waiting for maximum system load to trigger 7 simultaneous breach points." She paused just a beat. "That moment is in about 45 minutes. His jaw was tight. "How bad?" "Transaction collapse. Customer data exposure. Real-time financial damage in front of your investors." She held his gaze. "You don't recover from that cleanly. Maybe you don't recover at all." People had gathered behind him. Angela, a few engineers, others who had drifted toward the gravity of whatever was happening at this corner of the floor. Everyone listening, nobody pretending not to. Marcus was very aware of that. He was aware of all of it, the audience, the timing, the fact that he was standing in front of a woman he had dismissed publicly a few hours ago and needing something from her that only she could give. "What do you need?" he asked. "Full access. No restrictions right now." The pause. That one short pause where his hand tightened slightly before he let it go. "Give it to her," he said. He turned to Angela. "Full restoration. Everything, now." Angela was already typing. The system recognized Nia's credentials at the highest level within 20 seconds. She didn't say thank you. She turned back to the screen and she went to war. What happened in the next 40 minutes was the kind of thing that very few people will ever witness, and even fewer will fully understand in the moment. Nia moved through ClearPath's digital infrastructure the way a surgeon moves through a body in crisis. Fast, precise, no wasted motion. Every decision made from deep knowledge and clear eyes. She isolated infected nodes and cut off their pathways. She rebuilt firewall segments in real time. She deployed the trap she had been constructing in pieces for the last 24 hours, a false vulnerability, designed to look irresistible to anyone who had been watching the system the way these attackers had been watching. Marcus stood behind her. He didn't speak. He watched. One of the engineers leaned over to another. "How is she doing that?" Quietly, genuinely awed. "She knows the system better than anyone," the other one said. "Better than we do." Behind them, one of the investors had quietly walked in from the conference room and was standing at the edge of the gathering. He watched Nia's hands, watched the screens, turned to the colleague beside him and said softly, "Who is she?" Nobody answered him out loud. But the answer was there, in the room, in the silence. She was the person who was saving everything. The attack hit its peak at 2:17 p.m., exactly when she had predicted, exactly at the moment the system was at maximum load. Every screen in the building flickered. Multiple alert systems fired simultaneously. 2 engineers cursed under their breath. Someone dropped something. Nia didn't move, didn't blink, didn't flinch. She triggered the trap. The attackers, sensing the peak moment had arrived, drove hard into what they believed was an open vulnerability. What they found instead was a locked chamber. A contained space that captured their access pathway, traced their connections, and systematically shut down every point of entry they had spent weeks constructing. One by one, then all at once, the screens steadied, the alerts stopped, the system ran clean. The silence that fell over the floor was the specific silence of people who have just watched something extraordinary and haven't yet figured out how to speak into it. Angela pressed her hand over her mouth. One of the engineers sat down hard in the nearest chair. Marcus stood completely still. Nia leaned back, slowly. She closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds. Not sleep, just the exhale of 48 hours finally finding somewhere to land. Then she opened them, looked at the clean, stable, running system in front of her, and nodded once. Done. Marcus stepped forward. You stopped it. They're out. The data? Secure. The system? Stable. He let out a long breath. For a moment he just stood there, something moving through his face that didn't have a clean name, relief and regret, and something that had not yet decided what it was. Good, he said. Then, quieter, thank you. She looked at him. Then she stood up, slowly, with the careful deliberateness of someone whose body had been through something. She picked up her bag. Then I'm done here, she said. He frowned. What do you mean? She held his gaze. You fired me, Marcus. He heard it, felt it, in front of everyone. That was before I understood. Before you asked, she said. Before you took 30 seconds to find out why I was at that desk. Before you treated me like a person instead of a problem to manage. His mouth opened, closed. I tried to tell you, she continued, not just today. Last week, the week before. I wrote it up, I flagged it, I escalated it. She paused. You get to decide if that matters. The room was so quiet you could hear the servers humming. You're not fired, he said. Stay. Name your terms, title, salary, whatever you need. She almost smiled. The kind of smile that carries something heavier than happiness. I know my value, she said. I've always known it. I didn't need to save your company to know it. That was never the point. Then what's the point? She looked at him for a long moment. Trust, she said. The point was always trust. And you can't negotiate that after the fact. You either build it or you don't. She picked up the small plant from the corner of her desk, the framed photo, the spare charger. She walked to the elevator. Angela stepped out of the crowd quietly and fell into step beside her for a few paces. Their eyes met. Angela nodded, just once. But it held everything. Acknowledgement, respect, the specific solidarity of one woman recognizing another woman's moment. Nia nodded back. The elevator opened. She stepped in. The doors closed. And outside, in the Atlanta air that didn't feel so heavy, her phone was already buzzing with a number she didn't recognize. She looked at the screen. A competitor's area code. Word traveled fast in this industry. She looked at it for a moment. Then she pressed the elevator button for the lobby, stood up straight, and let herself be tired, completely, fully, finally tired, for the first time in 2 days. Some of you watching this right now have been Nia. You've done the invisible work. The work that kept things running that nobody knew was running. You've sat in rooms where your warnings were filed away politely and forgotten. You've been judged in 5 seconds by people who hadn't earned the right to judge you in 5 years. This story is for you. Your value is not determined by whether the people above you recognize it. It doesn't expire because someone failed to see it in time. And the proof of your worth is not something you owe anyone. Not a dramatic rescue. Not a perfect performance under impossible conditions. Not a crisis you prevent while running on empty. You were already enough before any of that. What Nia showed us isn't just about competence. It's about integrity. The kind that holds even when no one is watching, even when it costs you, even when the person who should have protected you is the one who let you down. And what Marcus showed us is the danger of confidence without curiosity, of decisions made in 30 seconds that take years to undo, of mistaking the ability to control a room for the ability to understand it. Real leadership asks questions before it reaches conclusions. Real leadership knows that the person closest to the problem is often the person most worth listening to. Real leadership understands that trust is not a formality, it is the foundation of everything. And once it cracks, you cannot simply decide to uncrack it because it became inconvenient. So here is what we carry from this. Pay attention to the quiet ones. Ask before you assume. Listen before you conclude. And if you are the one doing the work that no one sees, hold your value close. Know it. Don't let anyone else's failure to recognize it become the story you tell about yourself. Because the right room, the one that deserves you, it's already out there, and it will know you the moment you walk in.